Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
that's all good.
How are you all? I'm so excited. We have an excellent group for you
Okay.
today. We're joined by Melody Hildebrandt, the co-founder of blockchain Creative Labs and the chief security officer at Fox. We've got Anjali Young, who is the co-founder and CCO of Abridge Inc., which is the makers of Collab.Land. And then finally, we have Tay, who is a RaidGuild Cleric. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to keep this conversation fun, accessible. I know there might be a wide range of understandings of crypto and Web3 here. So if you have a super specific and niche question you'd love to ask one of our panelists, they'll be available after for all your questions. All right, so crypto. I think one of the major setbacks, or for outsiders kind of looking in, and maybe Melody, you can speak to this best, it can be a little intimidating getting started. There's a lot of acronyms being thrown around. There's a lot of money being thrown around. How would you recommend people first get into this? What are ways that they can avoid getting trapped into scams and other things that we've heard horror stories about?
Yes. So I think there's no doubt that there is a level of friction and I think some intimidation to entering the space for many for the first time. And there obviously are, very public stories where things have gone quite wrong for consumers, either through just kind of maybe naivete entering the space or like actual maliciousness of other actors. I think we're all real believers in the space and really wanting to have this be like the power of democratizing this technology for people and how to safely onboard people into this space because of how much it can unlock in terms of freedom and opportunity. So I think I always advise, and Anjali have talked about this, is really kind of to start small, and to start, there's really no substitution for just actually opening a wallet, buying crypto, buying your first NFT. And I think there's some technologies that are, easier to onboard. You might start with, a non-custodial wallet, that initially, or you might buy your first crypto on an exchange, and that might be a way that's kind of an easier onboard. And then as you get more comfortable, you probably want to move to a place where you're self-custodying your wallet, where you're actually moving to real DeFi and you're taking money off of exchanges. But that's kind of a journey to go on. And I think just getting started and maybe in a safe space is often the best way to get people to really understand what the power of the technology is and to get them more confident to be able to take that next step.
Right. Anjali, we were speaking before in the green room. You had a great analogy about how you'd see the progression of people getting into this space. I mean, to the point of starting off with a wallet with perhaps a company like Coinbase. How would you see that journey?
Okay, sorry, I don't know if this is the right spot. Okay. Yeah, and it kind of piggybacked off of what I said during the panel yesterday, which is like echoing what Melody said, which is like starting off small. So what would be the analogy there in terms of entering crypto, and what does that mean to start off small? And part of what the unlock of crypto is, and I have to be better at looking at people because that was feedback for me yesterday, I'm not looking at anybody, is crypto, the unlock of crypto is ownership. So what does that mean to own something wholly? Like when you think of your bank account right now, if something goes wrong, you can go to your bank and you can say, hey, this is my account, hey, this is my passport or my state-issued ID, and can you help me? And they will say, yes, I will help you. So in the same way, I was thinking of it more like a rent-to-own analogy. So like, let's say, or rental to ownership, which is like when you first move out on your own, out of your parents' house, maybe you move into the dorms or you move into an apartment. If you lose your key, you have someone to call. You can call your landlord who has a backup of your key. So you're not going to lose everything that's in your house, or you're not going to not have access to your funds anymore, because you can be slightly irresponsible because you don't own the house. It belongs to somebody else, but you get use of it. So in that way, that would be more of a Coinbase analogy where you join with Coinbase initially or a custodial wallet. No, it's not fully yours at that point, but you can learn the tools that you need so that you will be able to then own your own house and own your own keys. So if you lose your keys at that point, there's no one to call. So how do you start? You start by living in that world in this way where you're just participating in this rental type situation. So
Yeah.
no, we say in crypto, like, not your keys, not your coins. Yes, that's true. In Coinbase, they can decide that they're not your coins anymore. That's fine. But if you start there, you can kind of learn what that, like training wheels. So eventually you can work your way up to understanding that if you make a false move, or if you get involved with a scam, or if you send your assets to the wrong wallet, then there will be no one to call.
Yeah, I want to get back to the point of scams in a second, but I loved your analogy of the training wheels. Perhaps, Tay, you can take this one. Obviously, you're very experienced in this, but everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So at what point did you feel like, okay, I have a good grasp of this space, I feel comfortable being a little more aggressive in how I approach crypto and everything in this space?
Honestly, it took a long time, and it's going to take a really long time just to like build on the conversation so far. If y'all remember, there used to be this thing called AOL. They like had these round things that they would mail out to people. And for a lot of people early on, that was the beginning of how you access the internet. And you had to like, sign up for an account and then log in, you've got mail and all that fun stuff. That's kind of like the stage that we're maybe currently in, just slightly past for a lot of people. Think about your family members. I don't know the level of experience. I'm sure it's really diverse here, but that starting point has to start somewhere. So we see a lot of this stuff, intermediaries right now. But eventually you get to a point where like, I don't need an AOL account anymore. I can access the internet. So that's kind of the same progression that we're going down.
Yeah, and I guess what are then the advantages of taking off those training wheels, kind of going about this on your own without relying on a company, say, like Coinbase to protect you? Maybe Anjali, you want to take that one?
Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question there, because I was already thinking about the fact that it really comes down to the ownership being responsibility. Like, what does it mean to own something?
Yeah.
Like, why do we even care? And does everyone need to care? Like, right now when we talk about money, like, I can tell you the ways that it's useful for us. We have employees all over the world. And so we're able to pay them with crypto, and even if they don't have a bank account in their native country, and we don't have to wire transfer them, we can use crypto to facilitate that relationship. So it's like, for us, it's like a human coordination tool. But does everyone need to be in that position? Maybe no. People start on AOL. Maybe some people are still on AOL. I don't know. So
Any AIM users still?
but if you start on Coinbase, let's say, you may never move out. And that's okay, because maybe you don't need that. Maybe you're not worried about censorship. I think about like sex workers and how crypto has allowed sex workers where they are unbankable because the banks won't allow them to have a bank account. And then there's these other platforms where so much money is taken from them, it's so predatory.
Yeah.
And so crypto is the unlock for communities like that. It's unlocked for communities for people that don't, like I said, unbankable people, maybe people that don't have a home computer. Now you can use your phone. It's like, it's not for everybody. If the current system works for you, enjoy.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a need for people who the current system is not working for them. So, I'm hard pressed to convince people to all move to crypto. If you need it, if it's for you, if that's what you want, if that's your capacity and interest, then yeah, get to the point where it's your own keys and your own token. But maybe you never get there, and that's perfectly okay.
And can I just add on that
Yeah,
too? It's like, this is like a 21st century like skill set, right? Like if you don't know how to do some of this stuff, like it'll be a disadvantage ultimately. And so just like you can all, access the internet, everyone has an email account now, right? And 15, 20 years ago, that was a lot less common. So these are skills that like you have to know eventually. Your family will have to know, and just to start now and get accustomed to it is just the beginning of this all. So
Yeah, but what I love about this conversation is like the idea of keeping it accessible to, and I love that you're not evangelizing. I think a lot of people can feel put off by people screaming, if you're not doing crypto, you're an idiot, or like, what are you waiting for? But of course, the idea, back to the ownership analogy, perhaps for someone owning a home, that's it. They don't need to be like a mega real estate developer. That's not what they want to do, but they're slowly getting into the process.
And not everybody is even home ownership's not for everybody
That too,
either.
yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
like I can't have a yard. I've tried. I'm horrible at taking care of a yard. So now, we're renting and we don't have a yard. We have a patio. I'm just saying there's different levels of what you want to accomplish with your life. There's no one way anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like, we're thinking about it in terms of like the American dream of ownership. And so many people are cut out of that American dream of home ownership because of inflation and whatever macroeconomics that are happening.
A whole other can of worms.
Yeah, but now there is another opportunity to have asset ownership. So maybe that will be appealing to people.
Right.
Well, and the point about that, I think that's interesting, is that each of us can make that determination about our level of responsibility and how much we want to lean in. I mean, in the case of traditional securities, the average consumer is only able to buy things on the public market, for example, because there's a government regulation that determines who's sophisticated enough to buy private companies, to participate in venture capital, and most of us are excluded from that.
Right.
And in crypto, there's no patronizing force telling you you're ready or you're not. It is, which is an incredible set of opportunity. Essentially, all of us have the same opportunities in crypto. There's no secret back deals that are happening among like venture capitalists in the know.
Right.
Obviously, there's more knowledge among certain people, but the accessibility is there. But that also means that the determination about whether you're ready for it is with you, and there's no one else that's kind of looking out.
Okay, so for anyone in the audience, hopefully we've piqued your interest if you're not already excited to get started on this. So Melanie, maybe you could talk us through very first steps. How should you get started? What should you do to make sure you're protecting yourself from, again, scams? Or, I hear people writing their passcodes down on paper and then losing that piece of paper. That's a horrible situation to be in. So how would you recommend people get started and do it safely?
I think it's worth taking I have a cybersecurity background, and one of the core concepts in cybersecurity is like threat model. So it's like, who would actually attack me, or like what are my sets of risks, and what are they likely to do, or what methods would they likely use to try to attack me? And it's useful to kind of use that to ground, like, am I doing the sets of things that actually protect me against real life risks that I might face? And I think it's useful in this sense then to take some extremes. So if you're like Vitalik Buterin and you own many billions of dollars in Ethereum, and he's a little public about some of his security, not all of his security, but one thing, if you're holding billions of dollars worth of Ethereum, it is in your threat model that a criminal organization might break into your home with a SWAT team and try to steal a document. Like that's a reasonable thing that might actually be a risk he could face that I do not face. Like I don't think I'm important enough for criminal organizations to break into my house. So you often hear like, oh, you shouldn't write things down on paper because someone could come into your house and steal it. Like for the vast majority of us, that's not actually a risk that we need to be concerned about. So with Vitalik Buterin, like he's known for having like his actual key split in half in 2 different countries and 2 homes that are not his own, right? That's a level of extreme friction that he would go through because he's protecting billions of dollars that I don't think I necessarily need to follow that extreme level of security. So there is, I think where are you on the spectrum of kind of the assets that you're holding that would suggest like how you're most likely to actually be compromised. And for the vast majority of us, we're more likely to be compromised by phishing, by social engineering, by scams. So then it's like, how do you actually protect yourself against those types of risks? And so for me, there's really no better gold standard than writing it down and safely securing your documents in 2 different places so you don't lose one. And that, I think, is actually a strange mental model shift, because for so many years in security, we were told that was a really dumb thing to do.
Yeah.
But now it really is, I think, it is the best way to actually, there's no way you're going to memorize a 16-phrase password. Like, I think it is the best thing to do. But again, if you're kind of early on the journey, like I was actually onboarding some first-time users here onto Rainbow, and if you're a first-time person, you're claiming your first NFT, the backup is like saved to iCloud. And that's probably fine, to get started. You're claiming your first NFT. I wouldn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars within my password in iCloud. I think so. Because when you're on this journey, kind of you have to begin to take more and more steps, I think, to be able to secure stuff. And actually, I have a little demo here.
Oh.
So at some point, it's like you might be like, all right, well, I actually have enough money. I've staked Ethereum. I have no need to actually have access to it on a day-to-day basis. Does it make sense to have it in a hot wallet? Like you actually want to move to like a cold wallet storage solution, but most people don't need to do that off the bat.
Yeah. So I guess for some of our audience members who have never seen that before, how does that work?
Oh, this is the ledger. So yeah, it's just basically for a cold wallet solution. So none of this is actually connected to the internet. And particularly this is almost all my staked Ethereum, so it will never be useful until Ethereum 2 comes along, hopefully this summer. But like, I think this is kind of the gold standard. I think now, you guys might have different opinions, but for me, this is kind of the gold standard for like cold wallet storage.
Yeah. So what happens? I guess people might be concerned. Okay, what if you lose that? What if someone steals that? Do you lose all your money?
So again, you'd have your backup recovery codes that you save in 2 different places. So I think there's always, you need to account for like human brain stuff, which like you're likely to lose something. So how can I save it somewhere I'll remember and save it somewhere else I'm likely to remember, to diversify your risk, essentially.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then Anjali and Tay, without divulging too much, how are you both protecting your own assets?
One thing I would say is that that's kind of like the beginning. So using the email analogy again, your public key is like your email address, right? So like you can tell people that, and people can send things to your address, but your private keys are your password, so you don't want to give that out. I think the next step, evolution, like that's totally fine. Some of the stuff we're seeing now is like a system like Trusted Guardians, which is maybe something like a multi-sig, so not just having custody of your own keys, but having someone that's trusted to like back that up for you. So that might be the direction where we're going in these things, where like, well, we are susceptible to this like social engineering and attacks like that. So again, it takes a whole new like set of skills, and even like the most, any people can be vulnerable to these types of things, and the social engineering aspect is pretty deep. But it's also like emotionally vested too. So like some of the things that are happening now, the attacks that happen, and Anjali can speak about this, their Collab is insane. If you don't know about Collab, you can talk about it in the Discord.
Yeah, I mean, I focus less on hardware wallets only because the type of attacks that are happening right now toward people who own crypto assets, whether you have a hardware wallet or a hot wallet, or it's social engineering, and it's being able to identify scams, and whatever kind of wallet you have isn't going to protect you if you're being phished, and if you're being socially engineered. So that takes a certain level of sophistication that it's almost like, it's like you don't know where the challenges are coming from. But in order to get there, I explain it to my dad this way, because my parents are like, oh, crypto. And I said, imagine if I just got dropped into the city streets of Mumbai, and I have to now live on the streets now as a 48-year-old suburban American woman. Imagine what that would look like. I wouldn't even know what I'm susceptible to, what type of scams are even out there. And so the best way to be prepared for that scenario, which is what the wider world is right now, it's like the beginning of the internet, where you were getting phishing emails. You didn't know if it was your real credit card company or your real bank. It all looked exactly the same. You cannot take a moment. It's verify, but you don't even know what to verify and what to take for granted until you've lived in that place a little bit longer. Yeah. So I just don't know I just think people need to be aware that really experience in the space, starting with small bets and with small amounts of money until you learn you hear enough, you're involved enough, you're talking to enough people, you're in the ins and outs of it to know what to even look out for, because it's almost impossible for me to tell you what to look out for. I can't. I mean, I can tell you what scams we've seen so far, but it is very early, and that new scams are coming all the time. And it's like a fire hose of users right now. Like, this is how I describe it. It's like a fire hose of interest, and then the learning curve is like this. So you have all these new people coming in with a learning curve like this. It is ripe for scammers.
Have any of you fallen prey to some sophisticated scams?
Unsophisticated scam.
What
I have
happened?
fallen prey to a very unsophisticated scam. And I will tell you, plenty of people who are sophisticated also fall for unsophisticated scams. I don't know, Tay, if you want to. I'm happy to, but I don't want to take up all the space.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's a wild world out there, and not to scare anyone off, right? It's just, you have to be careful. And like I said, it just changes all the time. There's a lot of threats. And I would say, like, it gets really emotional sometimes, and you don't realize that, especially when there's, like, funds involved. So that would be just my advice. Just being aware, and then trusting the right type of people is always important in this space.
I have an example from yesterday, which I scanned a POAP here, and then an hour later got airdropped a fairly prominent project's Mint Pass. I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. And I actually thought maybe Anjali had done it. And I asked your husband, James. He's like, no, that wasn't me. I'm like, oh, this is actually a total fake.
Wow.
And it was a Mint Pass to, like, get me to, I didn't go down the whole path, but there was a kind of that initial, because you have this initial emotional reaction, which is like, oh, cool, like a cool project airdropped me something for, like, scanning in here. And you have to, like, have a second guess, which is, like, check yourself. I'm like, well, maybe a free thing from someone I've never heard of, is not going to be great.
Right. I think also one of the tricky parts of the unsophisticated or sophisticated scams is a lot of the frenzy around what we're seeing right now with the sudden interest in crypto, and I think NFTs in particular, is this feeling of like a time. I need to get in this early. If I wait too long, it's going to be even more expensive.
Absolutely.
If I didn't buy that Beeple NFT early on, now it's worth millions.
For sure. Oh, I love that you mentioned that. Absolutely, like FOMO. Tay will tell you, FOMO is hard and it is real. And if there's some advice I can give to people for not, number one, control your FOMO. Like, think about that internally, like what's important to you, and staying on that path. It's an emotional journey, like Tay said. And also for NFTs specifically, like what has helped me with FOMO, and I'm not saying I'm completely immune to it now, but I have a lot less of it, which is what's my thesis? Like, what do I want to support? What am I into? Well, I'm into women's projects 99%. And so it's like, I don't have to be a part of every project. And that's okay. Like, every project isn't for me. And there have been plenty of projects that I had access to that could have made a lot of money. And whatever, it's okay, because I'm supporting who I'm supporting, and I feel good about it. And whether they make it or don't make it, I'm part of their journey, and I want to support the world we want to see. So it's like, you want to support what you're into, what your idea is of what makes you happy and what you want to see continuing. And so this is a real opportunity to focus a little bit inward about what's important to you and what your goals are. That, I think, is my number one tip for FOMO.
I really like your thesis of, like, find your thesis in the space. And there's so much going on, right, that you can really pick a lane or an industry. So there's DeFi, obviously, there's NFTs, there's DAOs, and at the end of the day, all of these are kind of individual communities. You can contribute to any one of these things, any individual projects. Find your squad, find people that you relate with that can help you out through this journey. Because at the end of the day, that's all we have. We have these communities of people that support you. And when you can make those connections online, and then like meet them in real life, it's pretty phenomenal. It's really rad to see. So, finding that trusted group of people, rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah, and then I guess the last thing, I know it's hard to find like the telltale signs because they can look like many different things, but to use the analogy again for like email phishing, if the link looks a little weird, don't click on it, right? So in the situation here, say it's an opportunity to mint an NFT or bid on something, are there any telltale signs that make you say, okay, let me take a step back before I hand over my money?
I guess again it gets back to the projects you're wanting to support, and generally understanding what is the organization behind this, what is the roadmap this community has put forward, what is the governance around kind of how the project is going to move forward, and I think making decisions then for that is the right reasons, versus say sorting by 7-day rolling average highest price or something, would be a way that you might end up getting presented with high volatility and low long-term value assets. And there's an analogy. Actually, yesterday I heard this great story of someone saying, yesterday I bought yesterday I bought these 3 NFTs. They said, yesterday I joined these 3 communities. And I think that as a that's how this new user to crypto thought about playing in this ecosystem was, by buying this asset, I'm joining this community. And I think if you approach it from that perspective, as opposed to asset speculation, it's more likely to end in success for you, and less likely to be scammy.
Right, and I guess before you join a community, obviously I think doing your own research is important. I know a lot of the conversations around crypto often happen on Discord. I'm curious for all 3 of you, when you're about to perhaps invest in something or join a community, what do you do on your end as your due diligence to make sure this is the right one for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely, join their Discord. And that's kind of where Collab.Land fits in. If you haven't used Collab.Land before, the reason we developed this tool was initially DAO tooling, was for everyone that was in a DAO or had shares of a DAO to come together into a chat format.
So just to interrupt you, for people who don't know what a DAO is, could you explain that?
Oh, yeah,
quickly?
sorry. It's a decentralized autonomous organization. So people that come together with a mission have shares in that organization, vote together to decide how to distribute. Initially, it was distribution of funds, granting. That's initially where it started. So this was Collab.Land, which is a verification tool for crypto assets. Started as a DAO tool. We started on Telegram and then moved to Discord. The early adopters of Collab.Land were social tokens, and then last spring NFTs started using Collab.Land as a way to gather their communities. And so now popular NFT communities have thousands of people, and so what happens is they build their communities on Discord. So maybe you go to an NFT on Twitter, you find an NFT community, you look at their Discord ID, you join the community. There's usually a general room that's open to anyone who's interested, any lurker, looky-loo, just interested party. You get to know what the community is about. Usually they have their official links there, their mint links, their website link, and then you get a taste of what's important to that community. If everyone's just talking about money the whole time, that may or may not be of interest to you. If everyone's talking about, coming together and spending the money to buy art or fund a well in some city or whatever, education, there's different approaches for all these communities. You get an idea of what's interesting for them, and then once you buy the asset, then with Collab.Land you get to enter a token holders unlock, a channel that will be for token holders, or maybe a dozen channels that are only for token holders. And that's kind of where the work happens for stakeholders. That's where people are talking together about what they want to accomplish, what the mission of the group together is, whether it's to pump the value of the asset, like I said, whether it's to get a specific message out about, there's one called Expansion Punks. They added a non-binary character. So it's a lot of the movement there is to talk about trans folks and non-binary people and elevating different types of people. And so it's every community has its own special spin, and is that something that vibes with you? So you want to go there, you want to check it out, only use official links. Even with that, verify. Like I mentioned earlier, I fell for a scam, and it was because I was completely and utterly distracted. There's no way to tell. Something is going to look 100% legit. There isn't a way that you're going to really be able to tell a scam from not a scam. So the only way is if you've learned the pattern of that community and the way they're distributing information. Maybe they only use Twitter. Maybe they only use Discord, however, in a particular channel in a particular way. There's really no way to avoid being able to just from telling if something looks fishy. I mean, I can't tell you that in good faith that that's something that you can do.
I'm a really skeptical person, so I think everything's a scam. Like, I'm like, just assume that it's a scam, and then if they prove you wrong, then it's to your benefit. At the end of the day, no one can force you to buy anything, right? So you can sign messages through your wallet, but like to actually transact, you have to pull the trigger and say, I'm gonna buy this. So no one's ever gonna be like, you have to buy our fake ape, whatever thing like that. Yeah, at the end of the day, like you own your assets, and where you own those assets are really important. So understanding like what blockchain your assets actually live on. There's a lot of layer ones right now, so you might have heard of Solana or Avalanche. There's all sorts of like things happening in the space, and it's progressing really quickly. So ultimately, your assets are going to live on a certain chain, and if there's longevity in those chains, then that will be the ultimate test. But yeah,
That's actually a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a few months ago people were talking about Dogecoin. I don't know, maybe for a newcomer if that's necessarily like something you'd want to get into. Is there a specific blockchain that you find is more stable or more open to newcomers?
Sure. So the top two chains are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and those are like the stables that you can kind of rely on. There's a lot of speculation on other chains, so if you have bought Doge and it appreciated in price, then great for you. But at the end of the day, it's like, what do those Dogecoins do? Until I can buy a Tesla with my Doge, then, see how that goes.
I have a maybe slightly different perspective too, just like as a builder on these things. I think it's really interesting to look at like where are developers moving as a one metric of how successful a chain is likely to be. So like I would be personally, like you don't see a lot of development happening on Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin, so there's, as opposed to Ethereum, which has this thriving, vibrant ecosystem, and you have we build a lot on Polygon, and there's like a lot of interesting people, I think, building on Polygon for some projects. Solana similarly has a lot of interesting projects that are launching there. So as I think about what coins to buy that are, I guess, fungible on these different blockchains. I think the number one metric for me is, are people building there? And people are not building on Dogecoin. That is more of an asset speculation game, which might be interesting for a lot of people, less so for me. But what are the chains where the developer ecosystem is thriving?
That's a great point.
It's more likely to be the place where I think you're going to have you have a long game on what those tokens are going to be.
Yeah. And I guess would it be advisable to, diversify your assets across different blockchains, or stick to maybe the one or two that you like the best?
Yeah, I can't give any financial advice. Like, I am not the
Diversify your
person
bonds.
you need to ask. So I don't know what that panel looks like that's going to tell you how to best diversify your crypto assets. It ain't me.
I agree with that.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, I think this is a great place to end. Thank you so much to our panelists. Again, please stick around. If you have a specific question you'd love to ask them, we'll be having a fun little Q&A portion right after this. So thank you all for coming.